The town of Mineral Creek smelled like dust and old decisions. Cole Harlan rode in from the south as the sun was dropping behind the flat line of the plain, and Shadow moved under him the way he always moved when something in the air wasn't right. Not spooked, not slow, just deliberate. That horse had carried Cole across 4 territories and into situations that should have ended differently. And by now, the two of them had an understanding that didn't require words. When Shadow took that careful reading step, Cole listened. He tied the horse at the rail outside the saloon, ran one hand along the black coat, paused at the white left foreleg the way a man checks something he trusts but respects too much to take for granted, and walked inside. Back table, corner, the chair that let him see the door, the bar, both windows. He ordered a whiskey and watched the room settle around him. He was on his second sip when the first man came through the door, then the second, then the third. Cole set his glass down, drew the Colt, and opened the cylinder in full view of every person in that saloon. 5 chambers, 1 empty. He always rested the hammer on a dead chamber when riding, the way every man with sense did. Because a loaded peacemaker against a saddle horn in rough country was a fast way to lose a leg. He'd fired once, 3 days ago, outside of a different town for a different reason. Hadn't reloaded since. 4 rounds. He looked at the bartender. "You're going to want 3 coffins," Cole said. "Get someone started on that." The room stopped breathing. Then the door opened again. The 4th man walked in, older, colder, the kind of dangerous that didn't need to announce itself. Cole looked at him, looked at the other 3, looked at the 4 rounds in his cylinder. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "Make it 4. Then he counted the bullets again. There's a particular kind of town in the territories that exists as a monument to someone else's optimism. Mineral Creek was that kind of town. The stone facades on the north side of the main street were from the early days, when men with money and belief had looked at this stretch of Texas plain and decided it was worth building in something permanent. 30 years later, the stone stood there not as a sign of ambition, but as a marker of where the ambition had died. Everything else was wood, sun-bleached to the color of old bone, and the gaps between buildings were full of the particular silence of a place that had stopped expecting much from the future. Cole had passed through twice before. He knew Ira, the bartender, in the way you knew a man you'd spoken to across a long stretch of years. Enough to read his face, not enough to predict what you'd find in it. What he found tonight was a man who had been expecting trouble and was watching it arrive from an unexpected direction. Cole sat with that. He didn't move, didn't ask. A man who's learned to read rooms knows that the room will tell you more if you let it speak than if you interrogate it. Shadow was outside. That was the part Cole held on to, not from sentiment, but from simple accuracy. Shadow was his read on the environment before Cole could read it himself. 6 years they'd been together. 6 years of bad weather, bad country, and the kind of situations that tested whether a horse would hold or bolt. Shadow held. Every time. The white left foreleg had been an injury once, 3 years back. A bad stretch of rocky ground that had cost them both 6 weeks of slow travel and careful walking. The leg had healed stronger than it started, which Cole had noted and filed away as something worth remembering about damaged things. The horse had been careful coming in. Cole trusted that more than anything else in Mineral Creek at that moment. He was watching the door when the first man came through it. 3 men. Cole had seen their type before. Not these men specifically, but the grammar they were written in. The first one led with his shoulders. Left-handed, cross-draw, the holster worn at an angle that had been optimized rather than inherited. That was the work of a man who had measured the geometry of a fast draw and committed to the best answer he'd found. Dangerous in the specific way of professionals who had thought hard about what they were doing. The second man was younger, maybe 24, 25. He stood slightly behind and to the right of the first, and his eyes were doing something the first man's eyes weren't. Moving, checking the room, not from confidence, from anxiety. The young ones who checked everything were either very good or very nervous. And from the way his weight was distributed, Cole put him in the second category. The third man didn't look at Cole. That was the one Cole watched. He looked at the windows, the bar, the back door, the angles. His hand never went near his gun because his mind was already beyond the gun. He was counting geometry, not reaching for iron. That told Cole that whatever these three were here for, at least one of them had been sent to understand something, not just to do something. Cole opened the cylinder. 5 chambers, 1 empty. The way any man with sense carried a peacemaker in rough country, the hammer resting on nothing, because the difference between caution and a hole in your boot was exactly that 1 empty chamber. He'd fired 1 round 3 days ago, hadn't replaced it. 4 bullets. He looked at the bartender. 3 coffins, he said. Get someone started. Ira reached under the bar without a word and sent the floor boy out the back. Then the door opened again. The fourth man had the walk of someone who was used to rooms making space for him. Not loud about it, just true. He was 40-something, lean and compressed, the way years of hard use compressed a man. And his gun sat at the precise angle of someone who had long since stopped adjusting it. Cole looked at his cylinder. 4 bullets, 4 men. Make it 4 coffins, he said, and counted again. Not for the room, for himself. Because the accurate count was the only thing you could actually work with, and a man who inflated his own position going in was a man who made mistakes when the reality landed. The mathematics were uncomfortable. That was important to know. The fourth man's name, Cole would learn, was Dade Pruitt. He sat down without being asked, pulled out the chair across from Cole with the unhurried ease of a man who had made that gesture in enough saloons that it had become automatic, and looked at Cole the way professionals looked at things they were assessing. Whole picture first, details after. Cole Harlan, he said. Yes. We were hired by a man named Alderman, relative of Ree Alderman. Cole had been waiting for that name since Laredo Bend. A known target was a safer target than an unknown one. You could see the shape of what was coming at least. But known targets still got found, eventually, by people patient enough to wait for the right moment. He'd always known the Alderman matter wasn't finished. He hadn't known the timing. Ree Alderman drew first, Cole said. Documented, witnessed, filed with the territorial court. That's not the version they're paying on. It's the version that's true. Truth and payment don't always follow the same road. Pruitt didn't say it with apology or with malice, just as a statement of the territory they were operating in. Cole respected the honesty, even in the context. They hired 4 groups. We're the first. 2 in New Mexico, 1 in Arizona. They don't know about each other. We don't coordinate. Cole looked at him. You're telling me this. I'm telling you this. Why? Pruitt picked up the whiskey Ira had quietly set in front of him. Because I've been doing this work long enough to know what a bad contract looks like. And because, he set the glass down, I watched what you did in Laredo Bend. 4 against 2. Nobody died. This isn't Laredo Bend, Cole said. No, Pruitt said. This is worse. You have 4 rounds and 4 of us. I know the count. I believe you. Pruitt looked at him steadily. That's actually why I sat down. The first man was named Hector Crane. Cole had picked up the name from the way the other 3 deferred to him, not to Pruitt, but to Crane, in the small involuntary ways that hierarchies express themselves before anyone speaks. When Crane shifted his weight, the young one adjusted. When Crane looked at a window, the third man looked too. Pruitt was the principal, but Crane was the weapon they were most confident in. The young one, Cole had decided, was an apprentice, too new to be decisive, too trained to be useless. He would do what he was told, which made him manageable. The third man remained the one Cole couldn't fully place. He hadn't moved to a tactical position. He hadn't put his hand near his gun. He stood slightly apart from the other 3 and watched Cole with the focused neutrality of someone performing a task that had nothing to do with shooting. Your third man isn't here to pull a trigger, Cole said to Pruitt. Pruitt didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. That was confirmation. He's an assessor, Cole said. Whoever sent you wants a report on what Cole Harlan looks like in a live situation, whether the reputation still fits the man. Reputations get old, Pruitt said carefully. Everything gets old. Cole looked at the assessor directly. So let me give him something worth reporting. He stood up. The room tightened. Crane's hand moved toward his hip. The half-reflex of a trained man catching himself before the motion completed. Cole saw it, did not react to it, just stood with his hands loose at his sides and let the room read him. The man who hired you, Cole said to Pruitt, wants to know if I've slowed down, if 20 years of this have taken something off the edge. He looked at Crane. Hector, you're the one they're most confident in. I can see why. The draw is fast and the positioning is clean. He looked back at the assessor. Write this down. Cole Harlan at 49 is not slower. He's more selective. There's a difference. Crane's jaw was tight. But selective, Cole continued, sitting back down, isn't the same as hesitant. And the room knows it. Look at the bartender. Every eye in the saloon went to Ira, who was standing very still at the far end of the bar, with his hands above the counter, the deliberate posture of a man who had worked in rooms like this, long enough to know exactly what body language kept him alive. Ira's been keeping bar in Mineral Creek for 15 years, Cole said. He reads rooms for a living. He's already decided where this ends. He looked at Pruitt. What has he decided? Pruitt looked at Ira, looked back at Cole. He didn't answer, but his hands settled flat on the table. The light through the saloon windows had gone amber, then copper, then the flat gray of early dusk. Pruitt looked at the clock on the wall behind the bar. Cole had noted it when he sat down. An old Seth Thomas, the kind that ran slow but never stopped. The kind that had outlasted the optimism of the men who'd hung it. It read, 5:42. I'll give you until 6, Pruitt said. There it was. Cole felt the room change around that sentence. The subtle recalibration of bodies when a time limit enters a space. Crane's shoulders dropped a fraction. The apprentice's weight shifted forward. Even the assessor had gone still in a new way. The stillness of someone whose instrument has just been asked to start measuring. Until 6 for what? Cole said. To walk out of Mineral Creek. Pruitt's voice was flat, professional, the tone of a man delivering terms he hadn't invented and wasn't interested in negotiating. You take Shadow and ride north. The contract closes. Alderman's people get told you left Texas. And the 3 other groups. That's not my problem to solve. It becomes mine. Yes. Pruitt looked at him without apology. "That's the offer. It's a real one. I have no interest in killing a man who might walk. But I have 18 minutes before this stops being a conversation." Cole looked at the clock, looked at Pruitt, looked at Crane, who was watching him with the particular attention of a man who had been waiting for an excuse. 18 minutes, Cole said. "All right, then let me use them." He reached into his coat, slowly, with the deliberate transparency of a man who was not reaching for a weapon, and set the Colt on the table. Cylinder up, rounds visible, 4 of them. "You can count them if you want," Cole said to Pruitt. "I want you to see what I'm working with, because what happens in the next 18 minutes is going to depend on whether you understand that 4 rounds and 4 men is a problem I've already solved. And I want you to understand it before Hector does something that takes the options off the table." Pruitt looked at the gun. 18 minutes. 18 minutes, Cole said, "and I'll tell you exactly how this ends." Hector Crane had been holding tension since he walked in. Cole had watched it build the way you watched a storm build over flat country. Slowly, with the specific quality of something that was going to break, regardless of what anyone wanted. Crane was the kind of professional whose confidence was structural, built on the certainty that he was the fastest man in any given room. That certainty was probably accurate most of the time. It was the most dangerous kind of confidence, the kind that had been tested and confirmed enough times to feel like fact. The problem with that kind of confidence was what it did in the presence of someone it couldn't read. Cole was giving Crane nothing to read. No fear, no aggression, no tell. Just the quiet, particular stillness of a man who had already done his arithmetic and was waiting for the room to catch up. That stillness, Cole knew from long experience, was harder to sit across from than anger. Anger gave a man something to push against. Stillness just absorbed everything and gave nothing back. Crane's jaw was tight. His hand had made 3 half movements toward his hip in the last 10 minutes, and pulled back each time. The 4th time, Cole didn't think he was going to pull back. He was right. Crane's shoulder dropped. The tell, the specific forward drop of a shoulder committing to a draw, and the hand moved. Cole was already in motion, not sideways, forward. He drew and fired in the same half-second that Crane's Colt was clearing leather, not at Crane's center, not at his face, at the gun itself. The shot was clean and precise, and took the Colt from Crane's hand in a spray of metal and sent it spinning across the floorboards, while the bark of the shot was still rolling through the room. Crane stood with his empty hand raised at the level where his gun had been, fingers curled around nothing. The saloon had gone completely still. Cole had the Colt up and level, smoke drifting from the barrel in the dead air. 3 rounds. 3 men. He looked at Pruitt. 18 minutes is up, he said, and now the math changed. Pruitt hadn't moved. He'd seen fast draws before. He'd employed the best available, had watched men who were genuinely gifted turn iron into something that seemed to bypass the normal sequence of human decision and motion. He'd thought Crane was at the top of that category. He'd built the contract around that assumption. What he'd just watched was something else. Cole hadn't drawn to defend himself. He'd drawn to demonstrate. He'd had the option. 3 rounds, Crane's gun halfway out, a clean angle, to end the confrontation entirely in that fraction of a second. Instead, he'd taken the gun out of the equation without taking Crane out of the room. That was not the action of a man slowing down. That was the action of a man so far ahead of the situation that he could afford to be precise about where he placed his bullet. Pruitt looked at the assessor. The assessor was writing. 3 rounds, Cole said. He hadn't looked away from Pruitt. 3 of you still armed. And I just told you more about what I can do than anything your assessor could have written from watching me sit at a table. He held the gun level. So here's what the report should say. Cole Harlan at 49 doesn't miss what he aims at. He aimed at the gun. That was a choice. He could have aimed somewhere else. Crane was cradling his hand against his chest, not broken, but the impact of a 45-round hitting iron at that distance had sent a shock up through the grip that would ache for a week. "Is the hand all right?" Cole asked him. Crane stared at him. "It'll ache," Cole said. "For a week, maybe 10 days. Move the fingers when the swelling goes down." He looked at the young apprentice. "And you didn't move. That was the right call. Remember that feeling, the one where you didn't move because you were watching what happened and deciding. That instinct is worth more than the speed you'll spend the next 5 years trying to build." The apprentice looked like a man who had come to witness a killing and wasn't sure what he'd witnessed instead. Pruitt exhaled. It was a slow, deliberate exhale, the sound of a man releasing a calculation he'd been running since he sat down. "The contract," he said. "I know," Cole said. "I can't close it." "I know that too." Cole lowered the gun, didn't holster it, set it on the table in front of him, handle toward his hand. "But you can tell Alderman's people what you found. You can tell them what your assessor wrote down, and you can let them decide whether expanding this, 3 more groups, more contracts, more attempts, is worth what it costs after what happened in this room tonight. They might decide it is." "They might," Cole said. "Most times the math doesn't work. Men who make decisions about contracts have to weigh the price against the outcome. You came with 4 men and a professional assessor, and you're leaving with a report that says the target disarmed your best gun without taking a scratch, did it in a fraction of a second, and then offered everyone in the room a way to walk out." He picked up his whiskey. "That's not an encouraging report for whoever's paying." Pruitt sat with that. Outside, Shadow was still at the rail. Cole knew this without looking, knew it the way he knew the weight of the Colt in his hand or the ache that would come to his right shoulder in October when the temperature dropped. Not because he was watching for it, but because it was a fixed point he'd learned to navigate by. He'd owned Shadow for 6 years. Before that, he'd ridden 3 horses in the 12 years of this life, each one good, each one eventually gone, the way horses went in country that was hard on animals and harder on the things they carried. Shadow was different in a way that Cole had stopped trying to articulate to other people, because the articulation always came out smaller than the truth. The horse had a quality that Cole had seen in very few men and almost no other animals. He was never in a hurry, but he was never behind. Whatever pace the situation required, Shadow found it. Not because Cole directed him, but because the horse had developed over 6 years of this road, his own understanding of what the situation was. The white, left foreleg was the marker. Broken ground near a creek in New Mexico 3 years back. A wrong step at dusk that had gone all the way through the leg before Cole could pull the horse back. He'd stopped there for 6 weeks, made a camp, built a small fire at night, let the leg heal at whatever pace the leg decided. He'd been on his way to something that hadn't waited for him, which had cost him professionally and possibly saved him personally. A calculation he still didn't have a clean answer to. The leg had healed strong. Cole had come to think of it as the truest thing he knew about Shadow. The injury was visible. You could see the white against the black from 20 yards. But the damage wasn't. The damage had become something the horse was built on now, and the horse was stronger for it than before. He thought about that sometimes when the right shoulder ached in February. In the saloon, Pruitt was looking at the door. "The horse is still there," Cole said. Pruitt looked at him. "Shadow doesn't spook and doesn't run," Cole said. "Not from gunfire, not from men, not from bad weather. He stands where I tie him until I come back, or until something changes so dramatically that he decides the rail isn't the right place to be anymore." He picked up the Colt and holstered it, cleanly, without drama. "He hasn't decided that yet. That means he thinks I'm coming out." A long pause. "I generally trust his read," Cole said. Pruitt stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate, the specific slowness of a man communicating that every motion was intentional. His hands stayed visible. He looked at Crane, who had retrieved his gun from the floor with his offhand and holstered it left side, favoring the impact saw right. He looked at the apprentice, at the assessor. "We're done here," Pruitt said. Nobody argued. The assessor, who had said nothing, written everything, and watched with the focused intensity of a man who understood that his job was to be accurate rather than brave, looked at Cole one more time before he went through the door. Cole met the look. He didn't smile and didn't perform. He just let the man see whatever he was seeing. Whatever he was seeing was the truth. That was the only thing Cole had ever been able to offer an assessor in any room, in any situation. The truth of what he was and what he could do. He couldn't control what was written down. He could only be accurate and let the accuracy speak. Ira came out from behind the bar after the door closed. He picked up Pruitt's glass, wiped the table, set a fresh whiskey in front of Cole without being asked. 3 coffins, Ira said. Nobody needed them, Cole said. You shot the gun out of Crane's hand. Yes. At that distance. In that light. The light was fine, Cole said. The Seth Thomas was throwing a shadow on the east wall, but I was shooting west. Ira looked at him for a moment. You notice the clock. I notice everything that tells me where the light is. Ira went back behind the bar. He poured himself something and held it, without drinking it. 3 more groups, he said. He'd heard it. Of course he had. 3 more groups, Cole agreed. And Pruitt's report. Pruitt's a professional. He'll report what he saw. Cole looked at the door. What he saw was expensive. Most men making the decision about whether to press a contract factor in the cost of the attempt. Tonight cost Alderman's people 4 professionals and a clean exit from a situation they should have resolved by now. He finished the whiskey. The math gets harder for them every time. And if the math doesn't stop them? Cole set the glass down. Then the road is what it is, he said. But I've been riding it for 20 years, and it's still the same road. Cole came out of the hotel at first light. Mineral Creek was quiet in the blue-gray hour before the sun fully committed to the day. The main street held the particular stillness of a town that had survived the night and hadn't yet decided how it felt about the morning. A dog crossed the far end of the street. The Seth Thomas in the saloon, visible through the window, read 5:40. Shadow was at the livery. Buell, the operator, had him brushed and saddled with the care of a man who recognized a good animal and treated it accordingly. He'd checked the white foreleg the night before. Not because, Cole asked, but because a man who'd worked with horses for 30 years knew the leg was worth checking without being told. He handed Cole the reins, without ceremony. Good horse, Buell said. Yes, Cole said. He led Shadow out into the street. The black coat caught the early light and held it, and the white foreleg caught it differently, not reflecting, just present, the way a permanent thing was simply present. Cole ran a hand along the jaw. Shadow pressed into it slightly, the small, specific lean of an animal that had been waiting and was now ready. "Good night," Cole told him. He meant it as a report, not a reassurance. Shadow didn't need reassurance. He needed accurate information about how things had gone, and his read of Cole's posture would tell him more than the words anyway. He mounted. The right shoulder was loose in the socket. August, giving it everything it had. Come October, the ache would start. A slow, cold grip that ran from the shoulder to the elbow, and stayed until March. The price of a knife fight in a hallway years ago that had rebuilt the joint into something functional, but different from what it had started as. He'd made the shot last night, with a margin to spare. He knew the margin. He knew when it would narrow. He rode north, out of Mineral Creek, as the sun broke the horizon behind him and sent his shadow out long across the flat Texas ground ahead. 3 more groups. He filed that the way he filed everything. Not with worry, with accurate weight. Worry was what happened when you imagined what might come. Weight was what you carried when you knew what was coming and made your plans accordingly. A man who worried about the road ahead stopped paying attention to the road under his feet. A man who carried the accurate weight of what he knew was simply better positioned for what arrived. Shadow moved beneath him with the long, unhurried stride of an animal that had learned the country didn't rush toward anything, and neither should they. The white foreleg rising and falling in the easy rhythm. Cole had come to know the way he knew the weight of the colt, or the creak of his saddle in cold weather. The report was written. Whatever it said was what it said. The road north was what it was. He rode it anyway. Let me tell you what that room in Mineral Creek was really about. Cole had 4 rounds and 4 men, and the instinct of every man in that saloon, and probably every man watching this, was to do the arithmetic and find it frightening. 4 against 1. Numbers that favor the crowd. But Cole didn't do that arithmetic. He did a different one. He asked, what do 4 men in an enclosed space actually represent? Not 4 against 1. A sequence. Bodies that can't fire simultaneously without hitting each other. Lines of fire that conflict. A room that reorganizes itself the moment the first shot is fired. And the man who knows where the room is reorganizing toward is not the same as the man reacting to where it's been. That's the difference between fear and geometry. Fear counts the guns pointed at you. Geometry counts the angles. Cole sat in that room with 3 bullets fewer than the situation demanded on paper, and he ran it with words and position and one precise shot that took the most dangerous gun out of the fight without adding a body to the count. That shot was the pivot point. Not because it was spectacular, though it was, but because of what it communicated. It said, I had a choice about where that bullet went, and I chose the gun. Imagine where I'd choose if I were less patient. That communication ended the contract more completely than any killing would have. There's something worth carrying out of Mineral Creek that has nothing to do with gunfights. The most dangerous version of any situation is the one where you're working from an inflated count. More resources than you have, more time, more certainty. Cole counted exactly 4 rounds because there were 4 rounds. He counted 4 coffins because there were 4 men. When the count changed, he changed the count. He didn't argue with it or hide from it or pretend it was different than it was. The accurate count is uncomfortable. That's why most people don't keep it. And the men who keep it, who sit with the true number and work from there, instead of the number they wish they had, those are the men who walk out of Mineral Creek and keep riding. Shadow was at the rail. The black horse with the white left foreleg, standing with the patience of an animal that had been broken once and healed stronger, and had no more interest in drama than the plane itself. Cole came out, and Shadow pressed into his hand, and they rode north. That's enough? That's always been enough. If this one stayed with you, drop a comment right now. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Every country in those comments is someone riding with us, and I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't. Cole Harlan isn't done, and neither is the road ahead of him. This is Frank Ardell for Silver Dollar. Ride safe.